People only watch us playing the tennis match and they're like, oh, they judge us based only on that. And sometimes I feel they're not seeing us. And I struggled with that. I was struggling with the fact that they're not seeing me as a person. They're seeing me as a tennis player. That for me was a very big problem.
Well, I just want to welcome everybody here today for this wonderful panel. We're celebrating World Mental Health Day, which is an international day. We're focusing on mental health. We're focusing on the awareness of it and also to destigmatize it around the world. So very excited to have all of you guys here. First, I want to introduce Dr. Myra Altman, clinical psychologist and vice president of clinical strategy and research at Modern Health. So thank you so much for joining us. Also, Dr. Becky Ahlgren Bedics, the vice president of mental health and wellness for the Women's Tennis Association. And superstar Sania Mirza, still playing on the WTA tour, 6 Grand Slam titles, mother. And we really, really are fortunate to have you with us today to discuss mental health. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Becky, I'm going to start with you. Earlier this year, Modern Health became the WTA's official partner in mental health care, really with the goal of destigmatizing the mental health care, not only for athletes, but for people all over the world. I'm curious to hear from you what that partnership means to you and the WTA.
Oh, great question. We are so excited about this partnership because it's more than a partnership, it's a collaboration, right? And what Modern Health brings to the discussion with us is the depth and the breadth of knowledge and experience they have in this space and being able to extend it to a larger base and provide services across a much larger base. So we're really excited to learn from them. And then I think what we bring to this collaboration is the tennis knowledge and experience. We've been in the space of mental health with the WTA for over a quarter of a century. So we've been here and we can offer that education and experience to this collaboration. We're super excited.
Yeah, likewise, I think it's so exciting. Sports, I think, is starting to be at the forefront of the conversation about mental health and changing the conversation, reducing stigma. So it's just such an exciting partnership to come together and think about how we can further that reduction in stigma, change the conversation.
You know, it's interesting that you say that sports is on the forefront. I first played professional sports in 1991. I stopped in 2008. And it just seems to me that it has changed so much really in the last few years of athletes being a little bit more open and willing to talk about it. We've seen in the news, Naomi Osaka has been very outspoken, discussing what she goes through. Simone Biles at the Olympics was one. I was reading earlier about Tom Holland, a famous actor who's really been kind of struggling with the mental health. And I wanted to hear from Sania, who's played for a lot of years, on what you think it is. What is it about the mental health right now that is letting more really famous people discuss it, what they're going through?
I think that, and you know that obviously because you played as well, like tennis specifically or sport is so much more than just physical effort, right? The mental work that goes into trying to win, making decisions and staying on top, the pressure you deal with, the things people say. And now you have obviously social media, you know, where you're opening it and you're like, everybody's like, oh my God, you're so bad or you're so good or whatever. And all this you're processing on a daily basis. And people sometimes forget that as athletes, we're also normal human beings who go through relationships, breakups, good and bad, with your family, with your boyfriends, with your husbands. I mean, there's so much that goes on, but like people only watch us playing the tennis match and they're like, oh, they judge us based only on that. And sometimes I feel they're not seeing us. And I struggled with that. I was struggling with the fact that they're not seeing me as a person. They're seeing me as a tennis player. That for me was a very big problem.
I was curious from you, Myra, why do you think that is that it's changed in the last few years?
Well, I think the pandemic has certainly accelerated that. We were seeing a trend of stigma being reduced before that, but I think with the pandemic, everyone was collectively going through something at the same time around the world, which is really rare. And we've seen people say that it was the most stressed they've ever been, and somehow that normalized it, I think, for people of like, oh, of course I'm stressed. look what's happening in the world. And that, I think, started to change the conversation for a lot of people, whether you were feeling really stressed or it was somehow easier to empathize too. It's like, oh, I get what people are going through because I'm going through the exact same thing or some variation of that. So I think that played a big role. But then I think part of what you were saying that really resonated is this idea of being human, right? Yeah. You're not just a tennis player. We work with a lot of organizations, and that's a theme we've heard too of, I'm not just an employee, right? A lot of people were working from home. If you have your kid climbing on your lap, it's pretty hard to say, oh, you are just an employee, right? We sort of all got a little bit more visibility of everything else that's going on in someone's life. And so I think there's a little bit more shared humanity that came out of that, where we're seeing, okay, you're a full person, you have struggles, you have other things going on, that I hope has brought more empathy and with it, more understanding that, yeah, part of being human is struggling sometimes, and that's okay. That's just part of being human.
Yeah, it definitely is okay. And it seems, as you mentioned, during the pandemic, everybody had certain struggles related to it. I was curious, with dealing with so many players from so many different countries, how does it shift mental health internationally for the WTA and for some of the people you might be helping?
Absolutely. I think when we think about international, we really have to think and take into consideration the different cultures, the different approaches people have to mental health. There are some cultures, and I don't want to paint with a broad brush, for whom mental health is a very big stigma. And to even say, this is what I'm going through, or I'm seeing a therapist, would be a massive admission and be very difficult and maybe have some repercussions that they're not really sure about. So with the WTA, we're incredibly lucky that we are an international organization. My team for mental health and wellness covers at least 5 time zones. So we are all around the world. So we are a reflection of our population. And what that helps us do is understand a little bit more of the context in which our athletes are living. We really want to be a representation of who we are serving. And the other part about that is, even if you're from a certain region or a certain country, we still want to listen to the individual. Because, you know, if you two are from the same country, I never would assume that you've had the same experience. So being able to really be a good listener and invest in that individual, because you are more than a tennis player, right? You were more than a tennis player. Before you ever picked up a racket, you were somebody's daughter. You're someone's sister, you're someone's friend, and as you said, you know, spouse or significant other, so many other roles. So we really want to look at them as an individual, although do take into account that international overlay as well.
You know, it was interesting in reading just some of the notes coming into this great roundtable. And Sania, I was so struck by your story at the 2008 Olympics, where you got injured, you weren't able to play, and how you felt like you not only let yourself down, but an entire country, and how that was really, really hard for you to kind of get over. And love to hear your story about that.
Yeah, I was kind of at my, I broke through in 2005, and I was top 30 in the world, and all of a sudden there was this person from the subcontinent, a girl who was doing all these things. So there was so much attention on me. I almost didn't have any time for myself, and when I went to the Olympics, there was obviously, because I was a top player, there was so much because we had never won an individual medal until then, and there was so much hope lying on me. And I obviously felt all that pressure. And it wasn't like I felt it in that 1 month that they were talking. I was feeling it the whole time. And my wrist was so bad at one point that I wasn't even able to comb my hair, And so for me, it was not just depressing as a tennis player. It was also just as a person. I was like, I'm not able to live a normal life. I can't pick up my phone. And I was going through some other personal stuff at that time as well. And I think that me pulling out of Olympics when I went there was actually the trigger to everything else that was going on and that I had been going through, whether it was tennis related or non-tennis related. And that's when I was like, I need to talk to someone. I need to understand what's going on with me. It was not even I need to go and talk to a psychologist, because culturally in the subcontinent, there are so many differences to the Western world, right? Not just the stigma that, oh my God, people are like, oh, you're going to a psychologist, are you mad? They actually ask you that. Are you going crazy? And I speak to someone, I've been speaking to someone for the last many years now, because I know better. And I'm like, no, that's just not how it works. I feel better when I speak to someone.
We have one of our great champions in the sport also, Ash Barty. was touted to be a great player. She was a wonderful junior, and things, she didn't feel great about it. And I always read her story and think, what an amazing family she had, that they welcomed her back. She left the tour for a while, and there was no questions asked, because I think a lot of times you see in sports, or it could be entertainment also, you have someone that is, you can tell has that superstar quality, and sometimes maybe they get pushed a little bit too hard. And I always think back to Ash and think about her career took on a totally different trajectory because she had a supportive family that welcomed her and put her number one. And listening to your story, it's great to hear that also about your parents, because sometimes that's not always the case. And if you really don't have the support of the people around you, it can be so hard.
It's so tough. And coming from a culture where you're like, if you're a girl, you're supposed to do certain things. And they're obsessed with light skin over there. They're obsessed with being light skinned. So they think this is the most important thing in the world. Like, you'll get a husband if you have light skin. I mean, Asian countries are very obsessed with it, which is so ridiculous, right? Like, when we think, even to say it out loud, I find it so absurd. And they would be like, well, why are you making, and they would come to my parents and say, like, why are you making her do things that boys do? Like, why is she playing tennis? Why is she wearing shorts and playing tennis? She's going to become dark. That's why I said it's not just the Olympics that I pulled out and I went into depression. It is a series of events that happen with you over time and years of hearing things and people saying things or things happening to you, you know? It's not always somebody else's fault. And the biggest concern they had, like, I was like, no, I want to play Wimbledon. And they were like, you think, you know, a girl from India can play Wimbledon? And they were like, do you think you're going to become Martina Hingis? Do you think you're going to play with her? And ironically, me and Martina went on to do certain things together. I mean, for me, like, I've had some great wins, but when I beat her, because I was told so many times that, like, what do you think? You're going to become Martina, you're going to beat Martina Hingis? You know, and it's amazing that we shared so much emotion together. Like,
That's great.
So.
I know. I'm going to start crying with you.
Oh my God, don't start crying.
No.
You start, I'll start.
Myra, we just heard Sania's amazing story, and I wanted to talk to you a bit about modern health. They're in over 55 countries, and it's clear that it can't be US-centric, the healthcare for mental health, and wanted to talk to you about modern health and how they deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what was so beautifully articulated in your story is that it's hard to take that first step to say, okay, maybe I do need a little bit of extra support. And so you want to make that first step as easy as possible for people. And I think in the US, at least, we have this idea of, okay, mental health care equals therapy. And if we go in with that assumption, then we're assuming that everybody wants that, everybody needs that. And for people who need that, like, let's make it as easy as possible so you can get access to care in a day for that. But what are the other things that might make it easier for someone to engage in care? So we were talking about stigma before. We have both therapists and coaches on our platform. And it's interesting, in the US, people are like, oh, I want a therapist. Like, this is what mental health care is. But in other regions, some people might say, oh, actually, I feel much more comfortable having a coach. And we train all of our coaches in cognitive behavioral therapy, other approaches. So if that's an easier step for you, fantastic. Let's make that step as easy as possible. And then we have a whole range of other people who actually, they want to work as part of a group. We find in LATAM, the number of people who want to work in a group is actually much higher than it is in the US and Canada. And then there are other regions where people want to work on their own. So we have a lot of digital tools, and actually men and people over age 45 tend to be more inclined to work sort of self-guided through digital tools. And so we've just seen it's so important to have a range of different options, because it doesn't look the same for any one person in terms of what you want or need. And it also doesn't look the same across your life, across the ups and downs of whether it's professionally or personally. You might need something different today than you do tomorrow. And so if you're trying to sort of fit it all into, okay, it has to look this way if you want to take care of your mental health, we're going to leave a huge number of people out that also could get support and get help.
Yeah, that is so true. Listening to you there, I would definitely be one that would want to do it privately. And I know so many people that would feel more comfortable doing it in a group setting also.
And what's amazing is that the data shows that that can be equally effective. You can do a self-guided cognitive behavioral therapy course, and it can work as well as in-person therapy. So I think having those options and sort of changing the way we think about it, for some people it might not be mental health care, it might be exercise, it might be social support. It's sort of broadening how do we want to take care of ourselves as humans? And what do we need? And allowing those answers to be real and true, whatever they might be.
And also in the WTA with all the players, I mean, then you throw in wars that are going around the country, and you guys have your lot to deal with some of the players.
Yeah, it's been interesting. Although the WTA has had these services for 25 years, I've just been with the WTA myself just under 2. So I started in the middle of the
Crazy
pandemic.
couple of years.
Why don't you take an international traveling job in the middle of the pandemic? Sure. And you know what I like in it, the lifestyle that the both of you know so very well is, you know, it's not as dramatic as death, but it's kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts. And so, you know, when you're traveling and your plane is late or your luggage doesn't arrive or your, you know, food delivery company brings the cold food because you can't go out to a restaurant when you're on site, so you have to have everything brought in. Any one of those things, we are resilient enough to manage, right? But as you just very nicely, you know, intimated, it's this constant wave on the shore of, oh, okay, here comes this, and now here comes this. So working with resilience for sure is one of the things that we work most with our athletes is, okay, so how do we manage this? What kind of sets of coping skills and strategies can you use, and how are they working for you? And it's very personalized, it's very individualized. Some people, that stuff happens, you know, whatever delivery service brings you the wrong food, okay, I guess I'm eating Mediterranean tonight, even though I ordered Italian, but here it is. And other people, you know, that can be that can be the thing that really brings them some sense of distress. So really, how are people interpreting these things that are happening to them is so important on an individual basis.
I was interested, Sania, too, as you've played over the course of like 20 years now almost in pro tennis. Do you find that the players are a little bit more open with each other in kind of going through everything together now?
In the last couple of years, I feel like they are.
It seems that from the outside. I know when I played it, it didn't seem, you maybe had your 1 or 2 friends that you maybe confided in, but it seems like in the locker room, there's definitely more of a cohesive.
It's funny that you say that because I do think that there are a lot more, especially the top 10 girls. I mean, you would remember that not a lot of them used to be friends with each other, right?
I'm well aware.
Yeah. Like the top girls weren't really, you know, and the other girls, the ones who were like outside of the 100 or 150, they probably were friends because they had to room together for sharing expenses. So it was a bit different. But the top girls, they were sort of just with their teams, doing their thing, barely saying hi, as you know. I think it's changed a little bit with people like Ons, you know, like Ons Jabeur. I think she's so great for the sport, but also like just as a person, you know, she was number 2 in the world. It didn't affect her whether she was 50 or 2. She remained the same person. And I think that sets great examples, you know, that you can be really good and you don't need to be aloof from the rest of the world to be good. So I'm so glad that that's changed or is changing. And I think that it still needs to go some way. But it is in the right direction. I always felt like the men's tour was better with that stuff than we were.
Yeah,
I mean,
it seemed like that from the outside.
At least from the outside, it just felt like the men were a lot more friendlier with each other than the girls were, for whatever the reasons were. So it's changing.
Well, it's sort of things to think about because social support plays such an important part of mental health care. And then here's this group of people who are the only people in the world who can understand what you're going through. And so I'm so happy to hear that it's starting to become more cohesive in that way because I imagine getting that type of support is meaningful from that group versus other people in your life, maybe.
Yeah. And I think that for whatever reason, I think that, you know, especially young girls, they used to start so young, like at 15, 16, and they were so controlled, for the lack of a better word, by their environment and so controlled by their teams that, you know, they were almost scared to say hi. Like that's how it felt to me. Like even when I was younger, I was like, hey, and like, you know, I was like so and everybody was like, I'm like, oh my God, did I say something wrong?
That happened to me too when I first started playing. Exactly. I was like, I guess I shouldn't ask where they're from.
Yeah. And like, so I mean, it took me some time to understand that, but it was just that it was not that the girl or the girls were not good people. It was just the way they
culture.
were. Yeah, the culture was such that, oh my God, you're here to compete and you're here to win. And if you're friends with someone else, you're not going to win. Like, it was almost like that. Not that that was said, but I'm saying it felt like that was the deal. And I feel like they're able to separate that now. And like, you know, you're able to go and play a Wimbledon semi-final against the top player in the world, and then go and have dinner with them the next night, which is great to see. I think it's healthier for sure.
As we think about mental health, what's next in reducing the stigma globally?
Well, I mean, I think conversations like this and more people being open, that will continue to change the conversation. But when I think from sort of a healthcare system perspective, what I would love to see is it just become a normal part of care. In the same way that we go to the dentist, or we're supposed to go to the dentist every 6 months, have a mental health checkup every 6 months. When you go to the primary care office, talk about mental health care. Just making it part of those everyday systems that we interact with and just normalizing it. I think that would go a long way in sort of consistency and making sure we're spotting things early.
I completely agree, and add to that, in our world with the WTA, we do physicals on a regular basis with all the athletes, and part of that physical is a mental health evaluation. What are your stressors? What's going on with you? What can we help and support you with? So I think it's that formalized checkup, but I think for us, and kind of extrapolating that a little bit bigger, it's just being part of the conversation. You know, when we're on tour, when we're on site with the athletes, we have a room that's designated. Folks can come in, they can come in for 5 minutes and just say, you know, I'm really struggling with this on court, or gosh, you know, I just got a disturbing call from home. Can I just talk with you about it? And just being there in a consistent manner and being there in a way that is at their time. We also offer telehealth. So our athletes, that was one benefit of the pandemic, right? Is that everybody got used to seeing everyone through a little box. So our athletes are very comfortable, no matter where they are in the world, no matter where we are in the world, to be able to pick up the phone and say, you know, let's just do a quick session and talk about it. So it's the consistency and it's the check-in that's really important, I think, as well.
Well, I actually don't want to wrap this up because it's been so nice hearing from everybody. Okay, before we do stop, I want to hear from everybody. What are you going to do this week to prioritize your self-care?
Well, I actually do talk to someone, like I mentioned, every week, whether I'm feeling good or bad, because I feel better after I talk to her, even if I'm feeling good. Like, I feel like if I share it with her and the stuff that we talk about, it just makes me feel even better about what I'm feeling good about, if that makes sense, you know? So when I'm struggling, of course, so I do that once a week, no matter what happens. And for me, I feel, especially after I've had a child, and where we become second priority all of a sudden, right? I mean, it's such a selfless love that we experience. I mean, I also not found so much time for myself because I was trying to make a comeback and then have a child and, you know, deal with the other stuff. So yeah, I am gonna continue to do that and feel good about myself, and I'm extremely grateful for the place that I'm in today.
Okay, Becky.
Well, I'm going to pick up where she left off, because gratitude was my thought. I think I'm best for myself, and I'm best for everyone in my life, the people I work with and my family, when I can truly take stock of the really good things that I have and the really good things that I've worked to build with my family, with my friends. So just really reminding myself to be very, very appreciative of where I am and what I'm doing and what I get to do.
I think, yeah, good question. I feel like as a psychologist, I often forget to practice the things that I preach. And so I was talking to friends recently and I was feeling upset about something and they're like, okay, just name the emotions. I was like, I'm not going to name the emotions. I know what the emotions are. And they're like, they brought out a feelings wheel. And I was like, oh, okay, it's these three. And I was like, oh, I feel much better. So I think that like slowing down and just noticing and maybe naming, I think will be helpful. And then taking my dog to the beach and just getting to nature and just playing and having fun is the best self-care for me.
Yeah, so I have 4 kids, and so I always feel like I'm either putting out fires or the scheduler. I always try to do that. And so I always try, and it doesn't always happen. This week I happen to be working and away from home. So I always try to then go for a walk by myself for like 30 to 40 minutes and just listen to music and turn off like the alerts on my phone and just kind of walk and kind of gather my thoughts in terms of just having a little bit of peace, because I'm sure, like, you know, everyone else, when I try and go to bed at night, I have like a million things that go through my mind. It never seems that easy. So I always feel like if I could take a little bit of time during the day to just kind of quiet all the noise in my head, that really seems to help a lot. So that's what I'm going to try and accomplish this week every day, but we'll see. As always, it's always a work in progress. But thank you so much, everybody here, for kind of sharing your thoughts and your wisdom, and hopefully we can do this again, and hopefully this helps a lot of people out there.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.